Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very, very special discussion today. I am Tams Murphy, registered dietitian and head of content here at Nutrition Network. And today we have with us Dr. Hassina Kajee, integrative and specialist physician, who is one of the lecturers on the training that is launching today, menopause and perimenopause. Welcome, Dr. Hassina Kajee. It's wonderful, wonderful to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, Tamsin, and thank you to everyone joining us. This is such an exciting course, and I'm just so glad to have delved into it and to be here to share my knowledge.
Oh, and we're so happy to have you. Now, Dr. Kajee is also, actually, for those of you who don't know, one of the founding members and a medical director at Nutrition Network as well. So it's even more exciting to have her. She is a curriculum director, so she is quintessential in the designing of this training that is launching today as well. And I must say, it is one of our best. I know it sounds like I always say that, but this was so fascinating. And Dr. Kajee's lecture is particularly fascinating. In a way, it almost ties together all the other lectures in the training and fills in the gaps and gives us kind of this context. So the topic of her lecture is mitochondria, metabolism, and hormonal chaos. So it's all about kind of this interrelationship between these are basically what's going on within our physiology, and how this impacts on menopause and vice versa. And so we're going to talk about this today, which I think is a really, really exciting, a very, very exciting topic. And I do want to say, for those of you who haven't signed up for the training today yet, please do, because for the next 24 hours, you can still qualify for the early bird discount of 30% off. So please go look in the comments section, sign up soon, sign up within the next 24 hours so you don't have to pay full price tomorrow, please. It's really, really worthwhile. I know that for many of our practitioners, women who either are going through the menopause transition in perimenopause or are already in menopause or postmenopausal make up the majority of your clients in many cases. And for many of us, either you have someone in your family who's in this phase or you yourself are in this phase. So it affects so many of us. So I think without further ado, Dr. Kajee, maybe you want to kind of start us off by explaining how the pieces of your lecture kind of connect up, because you mentioned mitochondria, you mentioned metabolism, and then you mention hormones. And by this, I think you mean sex hormones, because I know metabolism we might put insulin, but I don't know where the hormones are sitting, if they're sitting in metabolism or in hormones. But I think, let's say, how do you link sex hormones with metabolism and with mitochondria? Please connect these for us, because it's quite confusing and complicated.
So the topic that I chose is intentionally confusing, Tamsin, because if you ask most doctors, this whole thing about your female hormones, it's just one of those things that you look at the cycle and there's so many things. It's not easy to understand just generally. So hats off to all the OBGYNs out there. And then when you add the perimenopause and postmenopause to it, it's quite a complicated mix. So, spoiler alert, my topic is a deep dive. You're going to have to pay attention, but I do try to simplify it step by step as we go along. Because if I can't understand it, then how can I ever teach it, right? So the thing is that it's not simply about hormones. Now, all of you know I'm the sort of the mitochondrial queen. I love the mitochondria. I try and fit it into all of that and inflammation into all of my talks. But that's because it is so key. And the more I dive into the mitochondria, the more I want to know about its role. Why? Because we can do something about it. We can fix it. And that's why I love it, because while you have the ability right now to be able to do something, those of us who are mothers, You look at your kids and you go, oh, I wonder how your mitochondria is doing, and you think, I know about all the different ways that it gets affected. And so my brain is always thinking about how to optimize mitochondria, especially as I get older. So that's the one part. And then it fits in so beautifully into how hormones are not just produced and metabolized. And what I go through in my talk is that there's a bidirectional relationship between the mitochondria and hormones. So you actually need estrogen for your mitochondria to function well. Did you know that? You actually need estrogen to boost your energy. And we go into all of the other the roles that the mitochondria play. And when we go through that, we all know the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It's so much more than that. But one of the first symptoms people come in with when they're going through the perimenopause and the menopause is this extreme fatigue and this brain fog. And it's not simply, oh, I'm tired, I didn't sleep well. People lose a sense of who they are. And this can be so, as a clinician, you can see people going through depression. It changes their relationships. They can't function at work. It's really something that it sucks the life out of them, right? And we know that this time is really such a busy time. And so that's the role of the mitochondria. And then, I'll talk a little bit more later as you ask questions. And then the other part about metabolism isn't just our general metabolism. Yes, of course, I go into the other roles that these sex hormones have. They're non-reproductive roles and massive roles in metabolism. But the metabolism that I'm talking about here is how are these hormones broken down? And if they're not, which organs break them down? And if those organs aren't functioning well, what happens? And then finally, when you look at hormonal chaos, is really the last thing that what I stress in my talk is we don't go to check the hormones first. No, you can't just go prescribe hormones. There are 4 to 6 systems that are out of kilter by the time your patient or client comes to you with hormonal chaos. So it's really a walk down the lane, figuring out and stabilizing each system, what to look for. And that's really the path that I've taken in this talk.
Oh, wow. So that sounds really complicated. I can definitely see how people are going to definitely need to watch your lecture. And I must say, having watched many of your lectures myself, I just want to tell the audience out there that Hassina, Dr. Kajee, has got an exceptional way of going into the papers, looking at these complex biochemical mechanisms, pulling them out of the papers, often with the images intact, and kind of going through explaining what is actually happening, how it's happening, and why it's happening in a very understandable way, but also at the same time giving you the references and the kind of sources so that you can go dive into it in more detail, understand the whole space that she's discussing or whatever topic she's discussing more thoroughly. So I think in and of itself, your lectures, I find there are always treasure troves of information with more doors to more information and more kind of places you can explore. So I have no doubt that this one is exactly the same. But this sounds like, I was going to say when you were discussing, okay, estrogen, you started with estrogen saying it's really, really important. In fact, it's essential for mitochondria to be able to produce their energy. So, okay, that makes total sense that now, obviously, people who are going through this menopause transition are going to have things like brain fog and terribly incapacitating horrible fatigue, right? Okay, so that makes sense. So then I was going to say, okay, well, then we just replace estrogen and we're all good. But then you went on to say, well, there's all these other steps that need to be ticked first, or almost need to be sorted out first on the way to kind of getting to the whole sex hormone balance and sorting out that chaos once you're in there, right? But now, so that leads me to question now in my head, should we be waiting for someone who's going through the menopause transition to come to us as medical doctors, or I don't know, whatever our profession is, coming to us at that stage saying, okay, now I need help. I feel like I'm having hot flashes and brain fog and fatigue, and I don't know, sexual dysfunction and irritation and anxiety and depression and I don't know, whatever else, midline spread and I don't know, whatever else my symptoms are, should we be allowing our patients to come to us at that stage? Or if there is this whole kind of pathway leading up to that point and a whole lot of other systems that need to be corrected, should we not be nipping things in the bud and getting to our menopausal women sooner? And if so, at what point should we be getting to them? And what should we be thinking about?
That's an excellent question, Tamsin. And really, it's what we're all about here at NN. It's about prevention, isn't it? And it's about early identification. And so, absolutely. So, our clientele, our people that we serve who, on the ketogenic diet, they're already getting all of this information. We tell them, all the lifestyle things. So they're already enhancing their mitochondria. So hopefully for our clientele, there's less to fix. But downstream, there are still things that I myself, for example, need to keep an eye on in terms of my liver and my gut microbiome and things like that. But absolutely, if we know more, why aren't we doing things earlier on, right? And it again comes down to first principles. Fix what, start with what you're feeding yourself. So food first, fix your sleep issues, foundational things that have profound effects in the body. Make sure you're doing regular exercise. Different types of exercise boost mitochondria, promote muscle growth, all of that. It becomes even more important. And this issue becomes less of a problem. But unfortunately, we don't live in a world like that. We live in a world where you eat pizza on a Friday evening, as a matter of fact, because that's your habit, end of the week, whatever, splurge. You don't really need to exercise because people are doing the things for the wrong reason. They're exercising to maintain their weight, or they don't have to eat healthy food because there's no problem. And then they see there's a problem. And usually the first problem is, I'm starting to gain weight. I don't like the way I look. So, usually or there's a disease, diabetes, something like that, and that's what people are coming for. So this is early identification. So for people who are not going through the perimenopause, and by the way, perimenopause can start about a decade before symptoms of menopause start. So if you're looking at something like in your 50s for menopause, if you're in your 40s, you can be sure that you've got hormonal fluctuations and lowering associated, just because that's just biology. That's just the way it works. Our ovarian reserve starts to decline. And so the earlier you start to make these changes, the easier the transition, the better the metabolic benefit that once these hormones have metabolic benefit. So when you're withdrawing that metabolic benefit, you've already put the things in place to support you, so you're not relying solely on estrogen being there to improve your insulin sensitivity.
Well, that makes so much sense. And I think it's great to kind of put it all into context that even while you might still be feeling, slim and energetic and like you can get away with the Friday pizzas and the lack of exercise and the sitting in front of the TV, and the very high stress job and the whatever else it is that might actually, be contributing towards your a metabolic dysfunction, that actually you should already be doing things then because your hormones are already getting out of kilter in your 40s. And I think that is actually a word of caution to all women, that really want to be obviously optimizing your metabolic health earlier, even if you can. But from in your 40s, I think you really ought to start doing that from what you've been saying. So I think that's something that people should definitely pay attention to. And I'm sure in your lecture, you dive into more detail about how that looks from a physiological perspective, how each of those things, whether they're sleep or stress management or eating appropriately or exercising, the different forms of exercise, how those then impact on your mitochondria, your metabolic health, but also on your eventual transition into, or maybe not so eventual, seeing it starts so early, your transition towards menopause. So I think that's really, really, really helpful. Okay, so maybe you can tie in a little bit more about when we're in menopause with estrogen and, I don't know, this hormonal chaos that you're talking about. Can you describe this in a bit more detail? What do you mean by hormonal chaos? And other than estrogen affecting mitochondrial energy production, is there anything else going on there with this hormonal chaos that's resulting in metabolic dysfunction or the eventual development of chronic disease?
So before I get to that question, I just want to add one point, Tamsin, because for me, I see the world as everyone is imbued with an intelligence. We all come into the world knowing the best for ourselves, and then people tell us to unlearn it or, remask it. But at the end of the day, when I see my clients and patients, they have the inner intelligence. I'm just facilitating, right? And so that comes with this menopause and perimenopause. It should be welcome. It's a transition. Many people don't live to the age where they get to experience it. It's become like a horror show and people hating it and such a change in life because of the way we've lived for the decades before it, right? So it's not really it's not accurate to say, let's start looking at ourselves. And I know that's not what you're saying, but that's not that's not the message I want to give. We shouldn't be looking after ourselves in our 40s. We should be looking after ourselves before we even give birth to that baby, and that baby is in utero, and now that baby is popped out, and we breastfeed them if we can, and we start feeding them with whole foods, and we introduce this concept to them of holistic living, stress management, exercise as part of their lives, so that they walk into adolescence already equipped, because you can get the hormonal chaos starting so early. There's so many teenagers that go into their first menstrual cycle already depleted, already gone through so much stress that, and this is something I go into as well, that all of these steroid hormones have a root hormone, which is cholesterol. So all of the idiots that told us to cut down on our cholesterol, and all of those pills that block cholesterol development, you're actually not going to make these hormones. So really, I want to start from there and say that as much as possible, you don't have to be sort of anal about it and like not, our bodies are equipped with buffering systems, but we want to look after our young girls as they're going into their menarche, and we want them to have we want them to have a good relationship with these hormones, not to hate it. And so much of diet and lifestyle messes up the cyclical secretion of these hormones, that it's become something that's such a burden, when really the reason we have these hormones is for procreation. It's really there to make new healthy babies to populate the world. And so I just wanted to add that. But you asked about, sorry, I've gone off track with what you asked me.
No, I love that, because I think it is really important. It's important to say that, you are an organism throughout your life that can at any point, be more metabolically healthy or less metabolically healthy. And we do need to take responsibility for that throughout our life. And I do want to refer to another amazing lecture within this training. Dr. Daphne Lyle does an exceptional, very in-depth lecture on how, actually it ended up being 2 parts of a lecture because it was so in-depth that it had to be split in 2. But basically how your life leading up to menopause impacts how you go through menopause and what that transition looks like for you, not just in your 40s, but actually her whole lecture is about how already as a child, then going through menarche, then adolescence and adult life, fertile years, pregnancy, lactation, how all of those, how you go through those phases also impact menopause. And that is not a message of kind of, oh no, now I'm in menopause, now there's no hope for me, but it because absolutely there's so much you can do at this transitional phase or even after the transitional phase. But if you can get there earlier, or if you can help your daughters or your granddaughters to become healthier earlier, maybe they won't have to struggle as much when going through these phases, because they will already have the tools, as Hassina said, to get through it in a much healthier and happier way. So I'm very glad you highlighted that, Dr. Kajee. And there's actually another lecture that popped into my mind that I also want to highlight just quickly before I go back to my original question to you, Dr. Kajee. And that is when you were talking about, we choose to have a pizza on a Friday night, or we choose to not exercise. That reminded me of another lecture by our amazing coach, the master coach, Tracy McBeath. She does a lecture within this training where she speaks about various tools that as a coach or a practitioner that you can give your patient or your client, or as someone who, just a lay person, a health enthusiast, you can use within your own life to ease the menopause transition and the time before or after it. And one of those tools that I just wanted to mention is the decision point, where you can choose to either move towards a health goal or towards where you want to be, or away from it. It's this kind of this fork in the road, if you will. You can make it towards choice or away from choice. And choosing that pizza would be an away from your health goal choice, right? But yeah, so if you want more tools like that, there are so many tools, both from Tracy and from other coaches like Ellie Bromley and so many other lecturers within this training. This is the place to go if you are looking for tools, hormonal, medical tools, but also lifestyle, incredibly powerful lifestyle and other tools. So come to the training for that. It's absolutely amazing. Learn from the experts. But back to the topic at hand, Dr. Kajee, sorry for my segue. The hormonal chaos. So you do mention this term, hormonal chaos, and you do link it to metabolic dysfunction. Now, you did mention estrogen's effect on the mitochondria, right? You said the estrogen helps the mitochondria produce energy, which is one of the reasons when you have a drop in estrogen when you go through menopause, you're going to have less energy production by the mitochondria. But that is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. It sounds like there's a lot more going on there. Are there other effects of estrogen? What about progesterone and testosterone, which also change? Can you tell us a little bit more about the metabolic and hormonal milieu that exists during this hormonal chaos phase?
So I wonder if I can share my screen at all. Is that something that's possible, Tamsin?
I do think so,
I'm
because
going
we
to
had Prof
try.
Mooks on here before and he did share it. So, how did he do? Oh, there we go.
I'm
Right at the
gonna.
bottom of your screen, there's a little screen with a plus.
Okay, I'll do that way because it does say present. So share screen. Let me see. It's give me.
Perfect. I just wanted to take this opportunity to quickly speak to our audience out there. I see there's so many of you there. Please feel free to drop your comments or your questions in the comment or question box. We would love to chat to you, see where you're listening from. And if you have any questions, this is an incredible opportunity to have someone with as much knowledge and expertise as Dr. Kajee in front of us. So please, if you have questions or comments for her or for me, pop them in the comments section and we will definitely get to those. Okay, go, Dr. Kajee.
So there are lots of slides, Tamsin, and there's no way for me to answer your question just in this live. But one thing I wanted to just go back. Let me show you this slide first, right? And this is just, I'm sure it would have been covered by other lecturers, but this is really every month. We're very complicated as women, aren't we? Because we're not just stable with one
No
hormone.
flatlining for us.
So many things happening. And that's because we have such a huge role to play in the world. And I want to just stop and mention that. The role of the woman is immense. right? And I want every woman to understand just the power that we come already in the world with, the power within us. And one of these superpowers, and I'm not saying this glibly, I fully believe this, um, that one of these superpowers is reproduction. And in order for the reason we're talking about this, these hormones, is because we reproduce. Now, the reason that we have estrogen in the first place is because we want to have a healthy baby, right? So if we just look at this table, I love it because not only does it show what's happening at the uterus level, so if you look, there's uterine cycle, there's the ovarian hormone levels, there's the ovarian cycle, and then the gonadotropic, so what's happening in the brain. So what's happening in the brain, what's happening at the ovaries, what's happening in terms of your hormones, and what's happening at the uterus level. At the same time, while that's happening, so much is happening in the body. The brain is starting to release something called follicle stimulating hormone, FSH. The reason it's there is, as the name suggests, it needs to stimulate follicles in your ovaries to start to get ready, because imagine the end goal is a healthy baby. For that to happen, we know we're not having this happening every month or every year or whatever, right? Neither would we want it. But if that's the end goal, then we have certain number of eggs that we're born with within our ovaries, and these, we need to have a number that get ready, and from there at least one ruptures and is ripe and is ready for fertilization if that occurs. And so that's the point of estrogen and progesterone. Now, in my talk, I cover estrogen and progesterone. I don't go into testosterone because that is the major, though we do have testosterone issues that come up, but the major issues that we're looking at are related to estrogen and progesterone. So if we simply look at that slide, you'll see that day 0 to 7, you're getting follicle stimulating hormone coming up. And then in the next half of that first half, we have levels of estrogen rising. And the reason the estrogen rises is because what's happening in that second column from the top, the ovaries, those little follicles, start to secrete estrogen. Now, that estrogen is there to strengthen that growing follicle, but it's also there to start to build the new endometrium. In case fertilization happens, you need a hospitable environment for that egg to go and nestle in and be safe, right? So that's the reason we have estrogen. It's making things bigger, right? It's making the breasts bigger. It's making the endometrium bigger. It's making the egg bigger. And then there's this massive surge of what we call luteinizing hormone mid-cycle. Poof, the egg, the follicle ruptures, but the body is so amazing. There's no waste. What's left of that follicle rupture becomes what we call the corpus luteum, and that has another function. Remember, estrogen was being secreted from that 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 ovary, that follicle, right? And now it continues to be released, but this time it's for development of arteries in the endometrium. But more importantly, progesterone is released, and progesterone, it stabilizes that endometrium so that we're not immediately shedding it. We have to keep it in place, right? And so when that progesterone level drops, that's what signals for you to have your period. Now, when we know the functions of these hormones in the reproductive cycle, we know when there's too much of one and not enough of the other, we can start to understand. I go into a little bit of detail about this in my talk, but if we move to the next slide, premenopause, if you look, it's like an ECG, like a heart rhythm. There's 4 different things happening. Now, obviously, the body is really complex, and we're women, we're really complex. So there's more than 4 things happening, right? But there are these pulses that follow and these hormones that are secreted, and I go into that in detail in the talk. But if you look at premenopause, meaning your fertile years, there is rhythm, there is a cycle, This happens, which causes that to rise. And then as that falls and this ruptures, that rises. And then it goes down. And then you have a menstrual cycle. But now let's move to the middle. The middle is perimenopause. And what do you notice immediately about perimenopause? It is all
It's
over the place.
chaos. It's
Exactly. It's chaos, right? Now, this is not a exactly how it happens, because in perimenopause, you're still going to have a cycle, right? But you're not always going to have egg rupture. You're not going to ovulate every cycle because we're running out of eggs. And then if you've got some hormonal mayhem, you're also not going to secrete enough. They're mixing signals. And I go through that. That is why I said my talk is quite complex, but I think very understandable. But just to highlight that in perimenopause, the main thing that we're seeing here is that we've lost that rhythmicity. The rhythm of the body is gone. And then what's also very important, two things. One is we lose estrogen is like this amazing genius hormone child, so many ideas, so much to do. I want to do this and I want to do that. But it needs a good mother or father or some kind of control to go, great, estrogen. Now you need to sit down and let somebody else take over, right? So estrogen needs control. Estrogen is amazing, but if you let estrogen just go all over the place, you're going to suffer. So we've got this kind of force of nature, and this force of nature needs to be reeled in. That's why we have the rhythmicity when it's normal and healthy. Like, okay, you've had your time, now settle down. Okay, next, we need you now, so we need it. But it also needs to get out of our systems. Otherwise, it's going to be causing so much drama. So estrogen's the drama. I mean, come on, it's dramatic. The big development of the breasts and the endometrium, and progesterone is like the type A and the type B. Progesterone is the calming hormone. It's the analgesic hormone. It's the anxiolytic hormone. And so as progesterone enters the fold, if you have a situation where there's too much estrogen, progesterone can't calm it down enough. It's like a manic person, and no disrespect to anybody, but for you to understand, somebody, you can't control it. You don't have enough of the buffering mechanism to make the period easier, to have less pain with this period, to have better sleep. So there's so many things that happen. And I think that this slide really shows the chaos that can happen before those hormones are withdrawn completely. Now, the important part for me is that all of these hormones, progesterone and estrogen specifically, they have other metabolic effects, direct effects, because estrogen is a hormone that enters the nucleus and starts to switch on other genes and proteins for the heart, for vasodilatation, for new vessel, development, for so many systems in the body. It has metabolic benefits. It improves the functioning of your liver. So the reason you gain weight is because your liver is now, this fat burning capacity is gone. One of the reasons that you lose weight, that you gain weight. So there are so many metabolic benefits of having these hormones in sync. So I hope I haven't confused anybody or worried anybody, but it's very simple to get, kind of complicated, but it can be very simple to get things in order.
Wow, well, it doesn't look simple at all, but I think you really did a great job at explaining. I love how those two hormones are kind of like the two children, the one that's, very dramatic and the one that's a bit calmer, and how, they need feedback, they need to be controlled, they can't just be let run riot. And that is what looks like it's happening from your slide in perimenopause. And then when you've been through menopause, then it seems like things kind of just flatline, and then you're your kids have flown the nest and you're like, where are my kids? There's nothing to control anymore. There's just, they're gone. What am I going to do now? So I suppose my question to you now is, okay, so we've seen how these hormones go a bit crazy, and we realize that there are various, I'm sure there are so many ways, as you said, that they impact on metabolism beyond estrogen affecting mitochondrial energy production. But I realize it's very complicated, clearly, and I think people are just going to have to go and watch your lecture to find out that in more depth. So perhaps we can dive rather into some of the applications within clinical practice. Let's say, for coaches, dietitians, doctors, when they are looking at interventions, what kind of interventions can help in your experience in this beyond hormone therapy? Let's look at the lifestyle interventions, whatever other interventions you can suggest beyond hormone therapy in this crazy, chaotic perimenopause and flatlining postmenopausal phase.
So, it really starts system by system, Tamsin. So, if you look at, so if I just go through the topics that I cover in my talk, I talk about mitochondria, the root of hormonal chaos. The next is about the gut, because within the gut, we can recycle estrogen, right? So, that crazy, beautiful hormone, we want it for a time, and then we're like, okay, go to sleep now. And we'll call you. A few more days, you'll be back, but now you need to go to rest, right? And that happens in the liver and in the gut. And the liver itself is so beautifully complex with so many ways of breaking down this estrogen, so that if you just not really doing great with the nutrition, and this level is not like, you don't have all your nutrients, it's okay, you'll still metabolize the estrogen. There's phase 1 and there's phase 2 detoxification systems, and glutathione, and so we have systems to make the estrogen soluble and conjugate it, and then put it into the gut to excrete it. But guess what? We also have another system, like a safety net in the gut, which is intrahepatic recirculation. And so that is there particularly for perimenopause, or probably more for menopause, because as you know, in menopause, your estrogen levels drop. But now in your gut, you have something called the estrobolome, which is basically a group of microbes in your gut microbiome that have been discovered, beta glucuronidases, that reactivate, deconjugate these estrogens that are ready to be passed. It goes, oh, wow, friends, let me rescue you. And then you reabsorb it into your system. And so you would understand, obviously, the way the body works is homeostasis. In adolescence and in your reproductive years, you don't really need this so much. But in your menopausal years, when you're not really producing much, you want to hang on to what you have, right? And so, because there are other effects, now we don't want them to be cyclical. Now, because now you're producing it from your fat, from your adipose tissue in menopause. So now we want the metabolic benefits of the estrogen, and they're immense. And so we want those beta glucuronidases not to be too high or too low, right? Because if it's too high, the action, you're going to absorb too much. And if it's too low, you're not going to absorb enough. So there's this sort of threshold. So that's the role of the gut. Then there's the role of sleep, stress. Then there are toxins and the effect that those have on your liver, hijacking your detox mechanisms, the effect that those have on your gut, making that estrobolome or your microbiome not function as well. Then we have nutrient deficiencies, things that you need, nutrients that you need to make sure your mitochondria are efficient, make sure that your liver systems work well, your gut works well, that all of those like the inflammatory mechanisms are buffered, and then we integrate everything and look at it as like overall. So really, when it comes to a practitioner, sort of the TLDR, too long didn't read answer is yet again the functioning of all of those systems that are in place to keep us metabolically active, to keep us metabolically healthy. Ketosis is a form, is a state that results in mitomesis, meaning production of new mitochondria. Um, the different types of exercise, zone 2 training and high intensity interval training, those are mechanisms that help you keep your mitochondria in check, what you have, and then boost the production of new mitochondria. Resistance training, to make sure your muscles are getting bigger and boost your mitochondria again. So all of these are in place in health so that when there are, issues that come up, wobbles, stressful periods, stress. I mean, you decide consciously you're going to eat that pizza, fine, because it's for your mental health. You're really good, you exercise, you eat really healthy, you don't have any food intolerances. And so you decide, okay, I feel like eating a pizza. And it is your absolute right, if you are looking after, because you know your body best, to do that if it's not going to make you sick, if you're not addicted to sugar and it's going to switch on. It's absolute right. Do it, but do it consciously. And so all of these are in place so that when you get to that space, but beyond the 50s, and you have these reserves that are left, you're not creating drama in the mitochondria, in the liver, in the gut, in inflammation by eating so much sugar, pesticides, plastics, heavy metals, that your system isn't just mopping up, mopping up, mopping up. You're actually approaching it with strength, with power, right? So the take home message is that menopause isn't something to be afraid of. It is something to empower yourself to approach with strength, with dignity, with honor. It's about making sure that your fat reserves, you're not overwhelmingly, you don't have too much visceral fat. You're not exhausting all of the organs in the body so that you get into this cycle where you're switching on metabolic mayhem because of age and.
Well, again, really complicated, I think, but I think you explain it so well. And I think something we forget about is when we think about, okay, exercise and lack of exposure to toxins and sleep and all these, pillars of a healthy lifestyle. I think many of us forget about the effect that things like the liver and the gut can have directly on our sex hormone levels and reabsorption and use in forms and everything like that. And I think that's something that's really good to remind people of. If they're ignoring certain systems like gut health, then there may be negative consequences on their sex hormone levels, not to mention just optimizing metabolic health, things like the importance of ketones and all those other things you mentioned. I think there are so many different mechanisms, and there's no one system that we should be ignoring. They all need to be tied together in a healthy way. And I also love that the way you explained it is an empowering situation. And again, you always go back to the message that you are in power of your own body. You know your own body best, and about making those decisions, but making them consciously, toward or away from your health goal. So I really, really love that. Dr. Kajee, at what point would you tell a practitioner or a patient that your opinion is that maybe lifestyle interventions aren't enough and maybe they should start looking at hormone therapy in menopause?
So I think that all of the functional OBGYNs that I follow anyway follow the same sort of this sort of pattern of how to address this. And the first step I have to stress is when somebody comes to you, obviously every single person is an individual, right? So you cannot have a cut and dried, this is, so that it depends what they're coming with. And if it's somebody who's already healthy, who already has taken steps, they've changed their diet, they exercise, they're doing all the right things, then the story for them would be very different to somebody who's just rolled off the street, has no idea, they just eat whatever they feel like eating. There's no thought process around, I am fueling my body with this because I need protein or I need healthy fat. There's no process around, I do this many days of exercise. You don't have to know the details of why you're doing the exercise, but I have, when you approach your life with structure, with intention, it's very different to somebody who lives with an unintentional life. And so I want to stress that, because we, as you know, and those of you who know me, my other pet topic is stress. And the reason that topic is a pet topic of mine is because in all of my years of practice and implementation, with myself included, one of the most difficult things to get a handle on is how you approach stress. If somebody has diabetes, it's easy to say it's a simple thing, but it's not easy. Okay, let me correct myself. It's simple. Lower your carbohydrates, balance your fat and your protein. It's simple. It's a formula. When somebody, there are things you can do that are simple. When it comes to stress, people do not put enough emphasis on understanding themselves and their response to stress in the moment by moment, and the effect that it has every single day of your life that becomes cumulative, right? That robs you of the ability to repair with your own body's mechanisms, the sleep, all of the redox reactions that we have going on. And so the first step is to make sure that this person is holistically, I look at a holistic approach. One of the things that I talk about, that I've spoken about previously, and I'm quickly scanning my slides to see if I can share, but it is something that all steroid hormones come from a common source, right? From cholesterol, like I've mentioned. The next step is pregnenolone. And from pregnenolone, all other hormones are built. So whether that's estrogen or progesterone, I'm just going to quickly share again, if I may. Share screen. If you look at this page that's coming up, it should be up now.
I don't see it yet.
Is that okay?
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. You see stress and hormone imbalance.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yeah,
So if we look at the picture, don't worry about what the picture says at all. I'll walk you through it. There are three different zones of the adrenal gland, right? So it's the zona glomerulosa, the zona fasciculata, and the zona reticularis. And in each of those layers of your adrenal glands, a different hormone is being made. Now, previously, I've spoken, and many other practitioners have spoken about the concept of pregnenolone steal. And that is an incorrect message, because there is no pregnenolone pool to steal from. Rather, what happens is this. We have a certain amount of cholesterol that enters the mitochondria. So if you look at the first step, it says cholesterol. And I talk about the star protein, which is required for cholesterol to enter your mitochondria. Now, let's just for a short moment imagine what happens when you lower your cholesterol because you're on a statin. You're not getting the cholesterol entering your mitochondria, right? But anyway, let's get back to the story. So here's cholesterol. What's the next block in red, it's pregnenolone. So
Dr.
what
Kajee,
happens is,
could I just ask if
yes,
maybe you click off that? There we go.
is that
That'll be
better?
clear. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's just really quick to understand that each of these hormones are forming in the presence of a different enzyme. So if you have enough of this enzyme, you'll make this hormone. If you don't, you'll. So what happens in the case of somebody who is highly stressed is, what do you need when you're stressed? You need cortisol, right? So in order for the body prioritizes cortisol over stress, over sex hormones. So if you think about the saber-toothed tiger is running after you, the last thing you want is to be making a baby then, right? You just rather want to survive. You want your heart to beat, you want your eyes to get you out of trouble, you want your legs to run. So if you think about it that way, when you're stressed, you want stress hormone. You don't want estrogen and progesterone. That's the next level of requirement, right? And so this is critical because when we are constantly stressed, and I'm stopping here and making a point of sharing this slide because we've got a lot of women. This is what I also many times refer to, and many people refer to as the sandwich generation. It is the generation when you have older parents that you might be concerned about, plus you have children. So you're in the middle of these two generations. Maybe you even have grandparents if you're lucky. And so you're in the modern world, you're probably a woman who's working, you've got to still look after everything that's going on with your kids, their school stuff, their social lives, blah, 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 the house stuff, we know, right? And as much as you might have husbands or partners who help you, you still have you bear the mental burden. That mental burden is something that shunts the hormone factory towards cortisol production rather than estrogen, rather than progesterone being. So the first step that I always do, and I'm going to stop sharing now, is to go back to that person and to handle stress, to figure out, to do the scores and to talk to them and find out what's going on in their lives. Then, in concert with that, it's looking after your mitochondria, explaining, I'm not giving you this diet sheet just because I want you to lose weight. Yes, it will help you lose weight. What's more important is that you fuel your factories, your organelles better. And that's why your body needs this. Explaining to them, this is where you are. So that, looking after that, talking to them. You cannot put somebody on hormone replacement therapy if their liver is junked up with sludge and not really, if it's a fatty liver, it's not going to be doing the right job. If you don't have the nutrients to break down the hormones, then you're giving hormones, but you're causing the toxic metabolites to build up. And remember that there are hormone sensitive cancers. So imagine you put somebody with a moderate risk of cancer, sex hormone related cancer, on hormone therapy or mild, and you're creating toxic metabolites. You're not making sure. So all of the steps is to first make sure that all of those systems are functioning well, and then start, if that is something that they agree to, and if there are no risk factors, no cancer, clotting issues, then to consider bioidentical hormone therapy.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Kajee. That was such an incredible discussion. I would just carry on and on and on because there are so many little segues and things that doors that you've opened, but we just don't have the time to go into them. So for those of you who any of your interest has been piqued during this discussion, please, please, please sign up for Nutrition Network's menopause and perimenopause training in the next 24 hours. If you still want that early bird discount, the training has launched. It is live. So that's really, really, really exciting. And Dr. Kajee, I think you've really helped us see during this discussion how the real power lies in connecting the dots, not just treating the symptoms. and not just focusing on the sex hormones, but looking at all the other systems, other hormones, other organelles, and structures and lifestyle factors, amongst other things that are playing such a crucial role in women's health during menopause and leading up to menopause. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for helping equip practitioners, doctors, dietitians, coaches, nurses with the tools to support women during this life phase that, as you say, doesn't have to be negative. It can be a phase of wisdom, of empowerment, of consciously taking control of your health and choosing your health consciously and intentionally. So thank you for sharing all of that with us. If people want to hear more from you, they're just going to have to join the training. So we will see you, Dr. Kajee, inside the training, and we will see the rest of you, our audience, inside the training too. Thank you.